Dominus Lentis Sonoris Lazari ad monumentum, lacrimatus est horum Deus, et clamatus.
This Lenten season at Our Lady of Lourdes, we're going to be having weekly reflections on the Gospel readings for the upcoming Sunday. The first Sunday of Lent's Gospel comes to us from the Gospel of Mark. This is Jesus' temptation in the desert. It's a very interesting story, and one that I think we can learn a lot from, especially during Lent. It says at the beginning of the Gospel that Jesus was drawn by the Spirit to go into the desert. Now, I think it's important to look at the context of which this was written, and of where this happens. Right before Jesus is drawn by the Spirit into the desert, that's from verse 12 of the first chapter of Mark. But verses 9 through 11 of that chapter is Jesus' baptism. So Jesus passes through water before he enters into the desert. This is very interesting because it sounds very familiar throughout the whole Bible. It's the same thing that happens with the Israelites and Moses. You see, before Moses and the Israelites wandered the desert for all those years, they passed through the waters of the Red Sea. So you can see there the passing through water and then entering into the desert. This is sort of a common theme that we'll be seeing throughout the season of Lent. A continuity between the New and the Old Testament, specifically Jesus and Moses. We will see continually that Jesus kind of renews Moses. He becomes a new Moses in the New Testament. Now, this Gospel of Mark doesn't really give us a whole lot of information or details about the actual temptations of Jesus, but the Gospels of Matthew and Luke do. Now, these temptations, when reading them, can kind of seem very, very insignificant or not applicable to us today. But look at the temptations. What are they? Satan tempts Jesus to turn a stone into bread. He tempts Jesus to throw himself off of the top of a temple and have his angels catch him. He tempts Jesus with all of the riches and kingdoms in the world only if he were to worship him. These temptations, like I said, may seem not applicable to us today, but if you look at the very nature of the sins, I think they're very applicable. Sins of pleasure, of wealth, and of power really is what it comes down to. Things that we are tempted by almost on a daily basis, I would say. Now, it's very interesting to see how Jesus combats these temptations. He throws Scripture at Satan. He starts using Scripture to fight off the temptations of Satan. Now, if you look at the Scripture verses that Jesus uses to fight off these temptations, again, it's very reminiscent of what Moses does with the Israelites. Jesus draws these Scripture verses from Exodus, and they're the exact same words that Moses uses to rebuke the Israelites after they have sinned. Jesus says that one should not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. Jesus says that you shall not test the Lord your God. Jesus says that it is the Lord your God alone that you should worship, and him shall you serve. These are the very same words that Moses says to the Israelites after they had sinned. So again, there's continuity between the New and the Old Testaments, where Jesus is putting forth himself as the new Moses, as fulfilling all that Moses had done. So I think during this Lenten season it's very important for us to recognize our temptations and follow the example of Jesus, to turn to Scripture and to fight off temptations using Scripture. These are very, very common temptations that we will find ourselves struggling with on a daily basis. And I think it's very important for us to turn to Scripture and to find where in Scripture can help us fight off these temptations and follow the example of Christ, to turn away from evil and temptation and turn towards Him. So I hope that these reflections throughout the Lenten season help you with your prayer life or with your sacrifice during this Lent. Just know that we will be praying for all of you, and we all pray that you will turn away from your temptations and turn away from sin this Lenten season and turn towards Christ.